Hi, I'm Lauren Wright. I'm a junior at Northern Highlands High School and I play soccer and basketball. I'm also a Girl Scout. This video is made for my Gold Award to help teenage female athletes prevent injuries. It has people's personal stories, the recovery process, what people think are the most common injuries, how they occur, and how to prevent them. Let's take a look. Have you had any injuries?
Yes, I tore my ACL.
How'd your injury occur?
I jumped and my leg was like shortened, and when I landed, it kind of just, yeah.
Have you had any injuries as an athlete?
I used to pull my quads and my groins a lot in both soccer and softball almost every season.
How did these injuries occur?
Probably just from, going too hard too fast without enough strength in my legs first, doing strength exercise.
Have you had any injuries?
Yeah, I tore my ACL.
How did your injury occur?
I was playing basketball for summer league for high school my sophomore year, and I went and cut weird and it popped.
Have you had any injuries as an athlete?
I have too many to count. Most of my injuries were related to my ankle, and recently I played college soccer, so during my whole 4 years there I was dealing with muscle-related injuries.
How did your injuries occur?
Overuse. My biggest regret about sustaining my injuries was not taking care of them properly and trying to work through them and always having an excuse to keep going when really my body was telling me to stop.
Have you had any injuries as an athlete?
I have had one injury as an athlete, only one. I have torn my ACL playing soccer in high school. That was it though.
How did your injury occur?
I don't remember exactly because it was a decent amount of time ago, a couple of years. I was dribbling the ball, then went up for a header. Last thing I remember, I just fell, and I'm pretty sure I hyperextended my knee, twisted it, and ended up tearing my ACL.
Is there anything you would change before your accident that could have possibly prevented your injury from occurring?
I think my injury couldn't have been prevented in a way that I had been practicing as then, but I think having more knowledge about injuries, especially knee injuries in female athletes, definitely would have helped. I knew it was something that occurred to growing females. I also know it had a genetic component to it. My mom tore her ACL 3 times in her life. I think the best thing that I could have done was be more informed about the possibilities of how it can happen, and had exercises that I had done to prevent it, and just keep my body healthy and strong enough for that not to happen, because it does occur so much in females.
Have you had any injuries as an athlete?
I have. I actually had hip surgery as well as knee surgery. I tore my labrum in my left hip, and I tore my ACL in my left knee.
How did your injuries occur?
Playing soccer, they were both landing incidences, and one was during a practice setting, one was during a game setting.
Is there anything you would change before your accident that could have possibly prevented your injury from occurring?
I was having complications with my hip prior to my knee injury, and I wish that I went back to PT knowing that I had a few complications. Maybe it could have prevented it. However, with a lot of these injuries, there's no way, it's very unlikely for you to prevent it fully.
Have you had any injuries as an athlete?
Mostly minor injuries, I would say strains and sprains.
What was the recovery process like?
PT for 7 months, 6 months, and just working out and getting back and running and stuff.
What was the recovery process like?
Mostly just rest at that period of time. I never saw anyone to gain strength or stretch or anything like that.
What was the recovery process like?
I went to PT 3 times a week. I had to get surgery to repair it too. It took me about 7 or 8 months to get back, and I kept going to PT for almost a year. So.
What was your recovery process like?
So I had surgery, and I was in physical therapy for 6 months. Crutches, the whole deal, the brace. Physical therapy 3 times a week. I also worked with my high school trainer in his room, and we did stuff all the days I wasn't at physical therapy. commitment to stay with it to get better in those 6 months, because if I didn't do it every day and continue working on it, I don't think I would have been ready to go in that amount of time. And actually, I think I stuck with it so well that I was able to start running sooner than most people were, which I think it really just takes a lot of focus and commitment, and you have to listen to your physical therapist and you have to follow your schedule of what you
Recovery process, mentally wise, it was a big challenge because you have to force yourself to take a step back and sit on the sidelines and watch the rest of your team play while you're working through your injury. So having that mental challenge was probably the hardest part of the recovery.
What was the recovery process like?
For my hip, my recovery was actually 8 months, and for my ACL surgery on my left knee, it was a 6-month process.
As a coach, what are the most common injuries you've seen?
More recently, probably knee injuries, ACL tears, and ankle stuff, stress fractures, things like that.
How do these injuries occur?
Probably lack of rest, I would say. Too little recovery, and also a failure to strengthen different muscle groups and overusing the same muscle groups at all times.
As a coach, what are the most common injuries that you've seen?
So obviously knee injuries, I see a lot of ACLs, MCLs, tears, strains, a lot of pulls, calf muscle pulls, and coaching soccer particularly I've seen a lot of ankle injuries, concussions, which I see more and more of as the years go on. But there are a lot of knee injuries, which is unfortunate, and those are the most severe ones. You know, a lot of people get ankle injuries, but they play on them or they come back quickly. Knee injuries are really definitely the most severe ones that I've seen.
As a coach, what are the most common injuries you've seen?
Probably ankles. Ankles get rolled, I feel like, almost on a weekly basis at times. I often feel it's just because bodies get tired and kids get worn down a little bit quicker than they used to. Other than that, I think probably ankles, if I had to say one.
How do you think these injuries occur?
Just from kids doing too much. I try to do a very good job of balancing what they're doing with me, what they're doing in other sports or other teams, if they're playing for multiple teams. I try to do a good job of balancing their downtime, and I happen to give more downtime than other coaches at the ages that I coach, mainly for the fact of a couple reasons. I think that they come out when they work harder if they have a day off. I feel like their bodies need more recovery the older they get. Plus I also feel that, you know, school, sometimes they get caught up with projects and homework and activities and such at home, that the family and the school is the bigger priority over soccer. So I feel that sometimes if you give them a day off every now and again, it pays itself back tenfold.
As a coach, what are the most common injuries you've seen?
ACLs and, like I said before, muscle overuse. So us as females, we have such a higher risk of sustaining ACL tears than any other gender. So, well, obviously than males. But the problem is that us, we don't really like to take care of our bodies, and we're not understanding the fact that we have to in order to avoid this very, very high risk injury of tearing your ACL.
As a coach, what are the most common injuries you've seen?
I work with a lot of the younger groups, so common injuries are more like ankle, but as I work with the older groups, there are more serious injuries as ligament tears, whether that's ankle, knee. I have seen a lot of hip injuries with the labrum as well. It's a lot of just tendon and ligaments.
How do these injuries occur?
These injuries occur through either impact with other players and also by landing.
As a coach, what are the most common injuries you've seen?
I would say sprains, strains, concussions, and of course more recently ACLs.
How do these injuries occur?
Sometimes it's, it doesn't have to do with anything. It's just an accident. Injuries occur sometimes because of accidents. Sometimes it's overuse. Sometimes it's contact. So it really depends.
As a coach, what are the most common injuries you've seen?
The most common injuries at the younger ages are impact injuries, collisions and things like that. When the older girls, mostly muscular injuries.
How do these injuries occur?
For the little ones, it's just a case of not knowing your awareness, kind of just seeing the ball, not paying attention to what's around you, and then a lot of collisions that way. For the older girls, it's not warming up properly, overexerting themselves when they're cold and things like that, so not good enough warm up really.
What is the most common injury you've seen?
Ankle sprains.
Is there anything you can do to prevent these injuries from happening?
You could do balance training, agility drills, different coordination drills will help with ankle sprains. Also, changing over from grass to turf helps out, because with grass you get some different inconsistencies in the turf surface. So having a level playing field has helped out a lot as well.
Do you think there's been an increase in injuries in your time of training?
I would say certain types of injuries maybe, but I've only been at it as a coach for about 5 or 6 years, and I've seen a steady amount of injuries in that period of time. There's a theory that has something to do with the turf, but it's hard for me to say because I haven't really been around since before then.
Do you think there's been an increase in injuries in your time of training?
I think so, actually, now that I think about it, because we're getting so involved and the athletic world is becoming so competitive that we're overusing every single muscle in our body and every part of our body, and then of course it's becoming competitive, so you can't take a break, and girls are getting pressured to participate more and not rest enough. So I feel as though the injuries, yeah, of course they're going to raise with that amount of participation.
Do you think there's been an increase in injuries in your time as a trainer?
Yeah, there's an increased recognition of certain injuries, such as concussions. Concussions is becoming a lot more prevalent. I think it's just because people recognize them more, so they're diagnosed in greater numbers. As far as other overuse type injuries, I believe that there are more. People are more motivated than ever before to play. They have big goals as far as college, playing in college, playing at a high-level high school, that type of thing. So their training ends up becoming more and more, so they break down more and more. So that's why I think there's more.
Do you think there has been an increase in injuries in your time of training?
I do. I actually just heard the other day a 12-year-old tearing their ACL, which is the earliest case that I have heard. So there are a lot more cases now.
Why do you think this is?
I think it's because we're thinking that even though they're so young, they don't have to worry about such a serious injury, although that's not the truth.
Do you think there's been an increase in injuries in your time of training?
I do think there's been an increase in injuries, yes.
Why do you think this is?
I think it has to do with overuse injuries with young athletes whose bodies are not fully developed. Again, some of the injuries are accidental, but others are certainly from overuse and sports specialization.
Do you think there has been an increase in injuries in your time of training?
Huge increase since I've been here in the last 10 years.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's overuse. I think the girls do far too much in a short space of time. And with multiple sports, they don't really do the same cool downs or warm ups. I think there should be continuity of what the girls, they need to take ownership, especially when they're a little bit older, high school ages. They need to take ownership on warming up and cooling down, especially when they do multiple sports. So they do a lot with their body over a short space of time.
Now that females are starting to play sports at a younger age, is that part of the reason we have more injuries?
Yeah, I believe so. Young females are very tough. They're very mentally strong, which means that a lot of times the females don't get the required rest that their body needs in order to be at peak performance. Because of that, because they don't allow themselves enough rest, then they end up getting more breakdown type injuries, such as overuse injury like patellofemoral syndrome or shin splints, even into ACL tears. ACL tears, I believe, with a lot of women, not only are there anatomical problems, but also I believe that there's just not enough anatomical strength sometimes for the knees to be able to handle it. So that's why they end up getting a lot more ACL injuries.
Do you make your teams do a warm-up?
Yes, they warm up every day. They do ladders and stretches.
Do you make your teams do a warm-up?
So back in the fall, we would make our girls do ladder workouts and dynamic stretching in order to get their muscles up as well as their heart rate up.
Do you make your teams warm up before?
Definitely, all age groups I think is important. One, for team building, I think it's good for when they warm up together, and two, get their muscles activated and prepared for the game, especially on cold days.
What do you make your teams do to warm up?
Go through a multiple dynamic warm-up from pretty much the calves all the way up through their body. So a nice gentle start, and then open the gates, close the gates, different types of movement, lunges and things like that. And then progressively make it a little bit more harder with sprints at the end to work on the kind of explosive movements we talked about.
What do you make your teams do to warm up?
So we do some running, jogging, light jogging, definitely couple static stretches, some dynamic stretches as well, moving high knees, butt kicks, make sure they're warmed up, ready to go before they start doing any workouts. So to be sure, it's more to prevent muscle injury and muscle pulls as opposed to, the freak things like breaking an ankle or straining an ankle, something like that.
Do you make your teams warm up before practice and or game?
Always, 100%. I learned that years ago from just going to different courses and teaching and learning from others that are around me that's something where no matter what, there's never an excuse not to warm up.
What does your warm up include?
I was lucky enough to have with my teams the last 4 or 5 years a trainer by the name of Jerry Garcia, not the guy that makes ice cream, but great trainer, great guy, and always came up with a great dynamic warm-up, and every year, every 6 to 12 months, would tweak it a little bit to do something a little more up to date, to spice it up a little bit and make it a little more interesting and a little more active for the players involved. Obviously, with their bodies changing and them getting older, the way and how and the duration of how they would warm up would obviously change as well.
What do you make your teams do to warm up?
We typically do a dynamic warm-up where we're incorporating various movements, focusing on various things such as flexibility, power, speed, agility, but for the most part it's a dynamic warm-up.
Do you make your teams do a warm-up?
I do make my teams do a warm-up whether they're 6 years old or 18 years old. And it's just a standard warm-up, stretching, jogging. I have them do a lot of ACL prevention because that's a stretch as well as helping them prevent that knee injury.
Do you make your teams cool down after a practice or a game?
Yes, they jog and they stretch again.
Do you make your teams cool down after a practice or a game?
Definitely. Cool down is the number one most important part of your practice, just because you need to take care of your muscles because we're working them every single day, and in order to prepare for the next day, you have to take care of your muscles the preceding day.
Do you make your teams cool down after a practice or a game?
My older teams, I make them do a cool down. My younger teams, they're just about exhausted towards the end, considering they're 6, so I don't make them cool down.
Do you make your teams cool down after a practice or a game?
We do, and most of the time that is a static stretch, which probably isn't ideal, but that is what we've been doing.
Do you make your teams cool down after a practice or game?
Yep, it's very important. Do a lot of static stuff afterwards because the girls have been running around an hour and a half, so the muscles have worked hard, so it's good to spend 5-10 minutes afterwards stretching the muscles out, and it's also good for the girls to spend a bit of time together after the game. So a lot of static stuff for about 5-10 minutes.
Do you make your teams cool down after a practice or a game?
Yes, we do stretching, definitely cool down jogs. Stretching is the most important part though. I know it sometimes seems like a burden or something you don't want to do, but it really is important to prevent injury.
Do you make your teams cool down after a practice or a game?
Yes, not consistently. Part of it sometimes is time and running from field to field, depending if it's a tournament or a practice or a game, or but I'd say every 8 out of 10 games, 7 out of 10 games, practices, etc., we will cool down at the end, and it's just forms of similar stuff that we did in the beginning, just at a slower, more a little more static stretching as opposed to dynamic. Static just being a little bit more still rather than a movement type of stretch.
What's a top exercise you think all female athletes should do?
Probably squats and lunges, yes.
What's a top exercise you think all female athletes should do?
I definitely think females need to strengthen their leg muscles and their core and their hips. So we do side-to-side agility ladders, and I think all females should do that. And you know, that's pretty much it. Stretching alongside of that as well.
What's a top exercise that you think all female athletes should do?
I think depending on the sport, it varies, but I certainly think that females need to focus in movements and flexibility with power, using various body parts, particularly the hip area. But I think, again, it depends on the sport, depends on how young the athlete is.
What's a top exercise that you think all female athletes should do?
I wouldn't pinpoint one. I just think a variety of exercises working on different muscle groups throughout the body. So you do your lunges for opening up your hamstrings and your groins and things like that. Open the gates, close the gates, mimicking striking. So just a plethora of different stretches, not just one on its own, really in isolation.
What is the top exercise you think all female athletes should do?
Top exercise. Right now, I think it has to do with ACL prevention. So making sure that you develop a program within your warm-ups and within your cool-downs to incorporate ACL prevention is a huge, huge, huge thing to do.
What is the top exercise that you think all female athletes should do?
A type of exercise. I think that stretching after workouts, so whether it's hamstring stretch, calf stretch, quad stretching, and I think a lot of practicing on your knees, your squats, and focusing on your knees and where they're placed during squats is super important because that tells you your hip alignment and with your knees as well.
What is the top exercise that you think all female athletes should do?
One of my favorite exercises to do is what's called a rear foot elevated split squat. It's basically a lunge where the back foot is elevated off the ground. It's a great single-legged exercise that helps with glute power, quad strength, and also hip rotational stability. So it hits a bunch of different areas within the leg, and I believe it helps out female athletes a lot.
What is the top exercise that you think all female athletes should do?
I think they should strengthen the muscles around their knees because I know too many people have torn their ACLs. So that would be like squats, anything to do with like hamstrings, your IT band, stuff like that.